I guess that's my cue. Good morning. Good morning. Hi. How are you? So, I decided to show you first a sample video of one of our works. It aired in Nat Geo last week. Got several replays and all that. It'll be airing in Nat Geo Southeast Asia in about 2 weeks or so. But that's only one of our videos. As you can see, I'm a producer director. I also showed photos because I'm also a travel writer. I shoot photos because I need it as part of telling stories. Okay, so when people ask me, "What do you do?" Of course, the natural response would be, as I said, I'm a producer director. I'm a travel writer. I'm a photographer. But then I think these are titles and means to do something more. I think how I would characterize myself is that I am a storyteller. Storyteller. Kwento. Yan ang hilig ko. From the time I was young, I've been consuming stories. I like O. Henry. I like novels. I like anime. Okay? I like comic books. I read everything. I watch everything. When I was younger, by the way, I'm 50 years old. Okay? 50 years old. I had my first email address back in 1994. I was born in 1966. So pretty much half of my life, pre and post the internet world, being online and all that. So back then, the way we consume things, the way we read, was just TV with 4 or 5 channels, just magazines, Time Life, National Geographic, or you listen to the radio. That was how stories were conveyed to you, be they a series, or news, or a book, or an issue, or a story that you read. It was very limited. Okay. Now, in the modern world, stories come in different forms, in different lengths, for people with different attention spans, in different platforms. Diba? It's evolved. And you may not even call them stories anymore because it has moved on to actually being content, not necessarily stories. Because there's been a significant jump in the appetite of how we consume stories, information, so forth and so on. Wala namang smartphone nung time namin nung bata kami. Ngayon meron. So a story, a narrative for instance, that would require 12 episodes or a 1,500-page novel to be consumed, sometimes a creator would have to take that and chop it up and evolve it so that someone whose attention span is only 1 minute can consume that. Okay? Sometimes it's possible, sometimes it's not possible. Or stories come in the form of content marketing or in terms of brand marketing. The last couple of days, hashtag Jollibee, di ba? Really, it's a story in the context of having Thai chicken or a yum burger, pero my first date, medyo hugot, asawa, hindi ako pinakasalan, so forth and story. But it's a story. It resonates because it taps you in the heart. Biglang naalala mo, binuli ako ng... Anyway, you remember stuff like that, but it resonates. And then you use it to sell a product, essentially, or to empower your brand or enhance your brand. So it has evolved. Okay. Now, whether or not 3 months down the road or 3 years down the road, you're still going to be able to push that narrative of someone walking down the aisle and passing you by, it's probably going to be gas-gas na, for lack of a better term, in 3 years. But now, it resonates. And that's a story. But then, to a certain extent, stories are fictional or non-fictional. Okay? I wanted to establish that first before I jump into what it is exactly that I'm going to talk about. Okay. We are, our production house with my partner in business, and I'm married to her as well. Our production house, uh, we do not, our focus is not on created narratives. Okay? So I do not have to think about a moral dilemma. I do not have to think about writing a character that needs to go through a transformation. I did not to conjure endings. What we focus on are actual real life narratives. We just happen to document it. Okay. For instance, in the last couple of months, I've been fortunate to follow Romy Garduse, uh, Seven Summits Conqueror. He had an idea of biking from the southern tip of Palawan Island, all the way to the north, which took him 15 days. He called it Pajak Palawan. He was going to bike it. So he did it for 15 days along with UP Mountaineer friends. I found that very interesting. So I tagged in to document it, take photos, write about it, so forth and so on. I like that story. It's happening in real time, in real life, and I don't have to create characters or create a dilemma. That thing writes itself. I just happen to document it. Okay. Currently, we're doing a campaign called #KnowYourNorth. I'm not sure if you've heard that. It's for Victory Liner. It's not a campaign to compel people to ride the bus. It's more a campaign to actually tell stories about the North, about the Pony Boys, okay, about Silaki giant clams, the advocacy to regenerate the diminishing population of clams, so forth and so on. These are stories that resonate with us. Okay, in the context of what we do, the real world is our space. Okay, we have to constantly, not by choice, not because we need to, but because of this quest for looking for stories, which has been there ever since I was young, because I want to tell that. I want to tell stories of ordinary people. I want to be wowed. I want grand places. I want to be able to capture that and present it. But with this voracious appetite for content of people and a lot of storytellers now in the form of bloggers, this one and so forth, content also becomes lists and this and that. We still focus on the long narratives. Okay, for instance, in our work there, when we co-produced On the Brink, it's a narrative on the issues that pertain to whale shark tourism. Should you allow feeding and swimming that close, or do we allow the Donsol method? We present it to you. Now, given that, you can actually talk about the same things all over and all over again, finding a different angle. Or, you expand the coverage of where you look for your stories. Okay. That is actually, the second part is actually what I'm supposed to talk about. Space. In the context of the Philippines as a big island, you can subdivide that. You can subdivide the entire Philippines into constructs that you define. For instance, if I say, I want to define it by 82 provinces, it becomes Apari, it becomes Metro Manila, Laguna, so forth and so on. If I say, I want to define it, I want to create a construct based on UNESCO heritage sites. Diba? And it becomes what? Underground River, Bataha, Davao Oriental. What's Davao Oriental? It's the newest one. Mount Hamiguitan. Diba? The 4 UNESCO churches, vegan, rice terraces. Then your construct of the Philippines is defined by those filters. Correct? Okay. Now, there's an area in the Philippines that has always fascinated me. Some people call it ARMM, Autonomous region of Muslim Mindanao. Okay? Technically, there are other Muslim dominated provinces or Muslim populated provinces, but they were not included in ARMM. Okay? What is the filter, or what is the construct that defines the autonomous region of Muslim Mindanao? Islam. Di ba? Islam. There is a negative connotation when you talk about ARMM. Kidnappings, beheadings, di ba? Conflict, so rido, blood wars, so forth and so on. There's that, it's synonymous to maybe what's happening in the Middle East. That's why of that negative connotation. You've heard terms like Moro, right? You've heard of things like that. You've heard of Abu Sayyaf or MNLF, MILF, so forth and so on. Should we go on with this or not? From a personal standpoint, this place has always fascinated me. So for the last 5 years or so, I've been going there to explore, to find out more about the place, to understand it more. And of course, you have to be very careful. But as you've been going back and forth, I realized that my narratives and my constructs have actually expanded. What I just to define what's on the photos, the first one on the left is a sultan. Second are bladed weapons. Those bladed weapons were forged prior to the arrival of the Americans. Those are heirlooms. Okay? And those particular swords have a bloody history tied up to them. Kung sino yung pinatay, kung kanino pinasa, kung kailan tinago, and all that. The man on the far right is an MNLF commander. He's second in command to Nur Miswari. Okay? As I've gotten back and forth, stories and narratives like that have started to come up. And then these three images are from Sulu. They represent the Tausug culture. Okay, now let's contextualize the Tausug culture. Okay, whereas before we only looked at the construct of Islam, in ARMM, as you begin to immerse, you realize more clearly that there are several people in there. The Tausug from Sulu, the Yakan from Basilan, the Sama Bajau from Tawi-Tawi, the Maguindanawans from the Cotabato, Maguindanao area, and the Maranao from Lanao del Sur. And these five, for instance, five groups of people are very, very different. In the same way, we Filipinos do not like to be categorized, not dislike. We prefer that there is a distinction, clear distinction between a Korean, a Thai, a Khmer, a Malaysian, and us. Whereas in the lenses and the eyes of other people in the West, they would see all of us as Asian. In the same way, from here in the comforts of Manila, and you look at down south, you say, they're all Muslims. Not knowing that there are constructs and there are differences in these people. These are the previous set, it's a Tausug. Sug meaning current. People of the current. It's a very proud race. It's a very distinct race. The Sultanate of Sulu was established. Islam was brought to the Philippines before the Spaniards came here. Okay? Before the Spaniards came here, with a long history. Culturally, very sophisticated. While in Manila or in Laguna, in other places of the Philippines, you were still living in caves and in trees. They already knew how to forge. Calligraphy is already a given. You know, it has a sophisticated history. And so, when from here, we look at the narratives of a people, or we look at the people there and say, and we tend to demonize them because of misrepresentations in the media, then we do not do them any justice. And it's easy to call them such and this and that. Okay? That is a Maranao house. That's in Lanao del Norte. It's called a Torogan with a distinct architectural flavor. Okay? If you take up architecture in any school, in university, that is going to be discussed quite extensively. Okay. Now let me go back. I can tell you of different narratives depending on what culture and what place. For instance, here, the first lady, the lady on the left, is a Yakan. Her name is Nuraisa. She is a weaver. She's about 19 years old. Of her age bracket, she is probably the best weaver of her generation. In 40, 50 years, if she continues, she will probably be a national living treasure. In the same way, Laang Dulay is a national living treasure. That girl is going to be one of them. See, look at the weave in her head. See, look at the distinct patterns. Maliit, very small. Okay? These are recurring geometric patterns. These are recurring motifs, and that was hand woven. If you look at the color, the synthesis of all those patterns, and then you try to understand it, and then you find out, because the Yakan has a fear of empty spaces. Pinupuno nila lahat kasi meron silang, they have a natural fear of leaving things blank. That's why they do it. And so when you begin to understand that, as you discover the place, then it fascinates you. And if people can do works of art like that, and have crafts like that, then these people are sophisticated. Right? Okay. That is Ambaleng Ausalin. I met her in a waiting shed in Lamitan, Basilan. We were waiting for the bus to bring us to Isabela. And she was there smoking and very animated, cracking jokes, this and that, and this and that. When she found out my name was Gabby, she said, I am Sharon, because we were it's like Sharon and Gabby, you know? And so, I'm Sharon. And so we were having a laugh. Then I found out that, oh, she's a weaver and all that. So I took her photos. 3 weeks ago, that lady, Ambalang Ausalin, was, by a presidential decree, declared a national living treasure. And I met her in a waiting shed. Okay, right? And so you look, and there's a wealth of narratives, there's a wealth of stories. These are kids from Sumisip, Basilan, for instance. They have a war dance called Tumahik, where the jerky movements are of the use of the spear. It's fascinating. Next slide, please. I will just go through the slides then. Next, please. Well, baka wala na. Anyway, I have different narratives. The point is, you look, I am not a political analyst. I look at this from the point of view of what I do. Of what I do as a documentary filmmaker. I look at this from the point of view of a photographer and as a writer. Okay? I try to understand the narratives. And the more I learn about the narratives, the more I get myself immersed in the culture down south, the more I know I don't know anything. And relationships and things that are happening are complex. And by bringing these stories to life and by informing people more about it, we tend to understand things a bit better. And I talk about myself. As I do this, I learn to understand cultures more and more. There is growth in me. And there's a thirst that gets picked. Say, I have to learn more. I have to find out more. And you meet more people. And then you begin to tie things up more closely. Still, recognizing that there's a huge gap and huge disparity in what you know and what's happening. So I'm saying the narrative in the South is not as simple as we would like it to be fed to us. And there is that gap that needs to be bridged. And for lasting peace to happen, for clearer solutions to the problems in the South, we're going to have to understand them more and more and more. I myself learn several things every day. And still, I do not know anything. Okay. So, in a nutshell, I'd like to end with a story. I'd like to end with a story. I can end with a lot more stories if you want. But, okay. That guy there, the MNLF commander, when we sent word that we wanted to meet him so I could photograph him, okay, we agreed on meeting in a school in Holo, Notre Dame School. So it's neutral ground. So we didn't have to go up to the mountains. We didn't have to go to MNLF territory. Okay. With us, along with my wife, with us, we were being secured by 18 SAF personnel. 18. Okay. We even had an APC with us. And so we were waiting in the school. And a pickup truck arrives. This guy, Yakub Mahmoud, came down in full MNLF regalia. Crescent Star, Moon, Crescent Star, Calis. Okay, came down with the boy, his son. And he came to us, and I said, this guy came unescorted. And he came, and he was walking towards us. And all the SAF troops stood up. They went to him. He paid respects. As someone from the outside looking at that, I say, the narratives here are not as straightforward. The SAF are paying their respects to the guy who was not escorted. And so, that's a simple situation that I don't understand. But that is an example of the complexity of relationships down there. So again, I repeat, I am privileged to be doing this as work. But then it's not just work, it's a continuous learning experience of discovering stories, of understanding and improving yourself, and having a deeper grasp of things in the world. And hopefully with that, we can also share it as part of our advocacy, so that the deeper understanding is hopefully passed on. And so for the realization that there's a huge gap that needs to be bridged, and hopefully continuously the learning experiences keep going on. Thank you.